Okay, thank you very much. Special thanks to Daniel for the amazing presentation today and for Calgary Power Platform user group for having me, and also to Iteration Insights team, because I know the hard work they are putting together to bring our communities together here today and also in the future event. So today I'm going to talk about Power BI, continuous integration and continuous development with Azure DevOps. So the session is not exactly for beginners, since I assume during the session that most of the notion around Power BI authoring and also administration are known and familiar to the community. But I would like to spend a little bit of time around the perspective, because when I build this presentation, I have the perspective of the BI manager, the BI admin. So we should follow on the perspective of the BI operation team. And I would like really to thank Daniel for the amazing presentation, because we do need governance and we need to be agile, because we need to deliver insight, not in months. We need to deliver insight in days, even hours. So how we can do that? Apply governance to our tools, analytic tools like Power BI, which is positioned as a self-service analytics tool. So I try to I'm trying to bring here my experience, because I implemented this kind of governance and multi-tier deployment process and architecture for some of my customers. And I hope you will enjoy the session, and there is a lot of to cover in 1 hour. So I set up my timer here, because I want to jump with a very quick introduction of myself. So I'm Luca Gualtieri. I'm originally from Italy, as you can guess from my strong accent. And I own a couple of BI analytics companies in Vancouver. One is positioned for being mainly a training provider. But today I represent PBI Lab. And so PBI Lab was born in March 2019. So it's actually still, let's say, a startup. We position ourselves as a consulting company. We are a Microsoft Silver partner in data analytics, and we are a Power BI partner listed in the Microsoft Power BI directory. Couple of our solutions are showcased there, and we are offering services in the marketplace. And something about me, I have over a decade of experience in BI analytics, and I'm a certified professional in Microsoft Power BI, Azure, and data engineering. But I have a completely different background. I'm coming from ERP system, and I used to work originally as a BA, and then I work as a project manager. And PBI Lab is born by a common passion for data. So I have another shareholder, and our team is pretty small, because right now it's just 5 of us. And I encourage you to follow the company if you have the possibility, or connect with me in LinkedIn later. So about today, so the good stuff. The first point I'd like to cover is a very quick demo of the new Power BI deployment pipelines, which is a feature in preview released by Microsoft, I do believe in the second part of May. Last month, actually. And I decided to put that demo inside my presentation, because I'm talking about deployment pipeline from a different perspective. So not a managed deployment pipeline given by Microsoft, but something that can be tailored and customized within your organization. So in order to do that, I need to spend at least 10 minutes showcasing a multi-tier developing process architecture for Power BI. And Daniel before mentioned the ALM, Application Lifecycle Management. So the Application Lifecycle Management is important not only for Power Apps, right? It's also important for Power BI reports, so for our artifacts. How do we ensure that our deployments are consistent, and then we deliver good data in our production environment? So I will talk a little bit about that, but then everything else is going to be demo, a little bit of hands-on, and I will showcase how there will be a demo where I will show my Power BI version control system created using Azure DevOps Git. and in combination with Visual Studio. And then I'll trigger a couple of pipelines. One of them is built fully in PowerShell, and that's going to be used to create Power BI workspaces and give the right permission to the workspace based on the security role defined in my multi-tier development process. And then the second one is going to be a pipeline for the report deployment. And for simplicity, for that one, I use a plugin, which is out of the box in the Azure Marketplace. But most of that plugin, most of these plugin functions, they can actually like realize using PowerShell. So you can actually get those functions out and realize your own deployment pipeline. And then I leave some space for the question in the end. So first thing, the deployment pipelines released by Microsoft. In order to run this demo, I will need to run. I will need to open a couple of tenants. One is a special tenant that I get as a silver partner, because with my silver partnership, I also got premium capacity. And this deployment pipeline is available, unfortunately, right now only for tenant where we do have premium capacity. And secondly, I will show you that in a normal tenant without premium capacity, I cannot use this functionality. So before running the demo, I need to really quickly talk about the new deployment pipelines requirements. So the tool is designed to have 3 stages. So the classic dev, test, and production. Then the requirements are strict. You need to be a Power BI Pro user to be able to use a pipeline or create a pipeline. You need to belong to an organization that has premium capacity, and you need to be an admin of a new workspace experience. So now, I do believe after testing that this is not completely true, because you need to be an admin or a member of that workspace. So because you know that there are 4 different roles for a new Power BI workspace: admin, member, contributor, and viewer. And which functionalities are we going to see? So actually, you can do a full deployment, so you can get all the artifacts from a dev workspace and push in the next environment, which presumably is test. You can do a selected deployment. You can do a backward deployment. Actually, for this one, we are going to see a couple of limitations. What's really cool for me is that you can apply dataset rules. So actually, you can have a dataset in a different environment using different rules compared to the other environment. And you can compare the environment. So actually, they call comparing stages. So you will see popping up colors that are telling you the environment is in sync, not in sync, and so on. And there are limitations on the workspaces themselves. So you need to be an admin or a member. The workspace needs to be a new workspace, not a classic old workspace that you were creating in Power BI years ago. And there's a very, very strong limitation. So one workspace can be assigned to only one pipeline. And as said, the workspace needs to be in a premium capacity. You cannot use the Power BI sample. For that Power BI sample, if you will click the link on top of my slide deck, the one that I share in my GitHub, you will see that Power BI samples are the classic samples that you can use, developed by, I don't remember now the name of the company, but to showcase Power BI capabilities to your customer or your stakeholders. So now let's jump at the demo. In order to do that, I will connect my premium capacity. And so over here, you can see that I'm connected to a tenant using my partner login. And immediately you can see that over here on the left, there's a deployment pipeline feature on the menu. And actually, if we look at another tenant, like for example, the one I'm running with PBI Lab, where I can only trigger the premium capacity as embedded capacity. So actually, in order to save and for cost reason, I'm not running a premium capacity right now. You can see that in my left menu, I don't have the functionality. So if I switch back to the partner tenant, you can see that I created before a pipeline called PBI Lab pipeline. So let me just quickly show you this. You can see that there are 3 stages. Even if when you create the pipeline for the first time, the splash screen is going to be blank. So actually you will need to assign the first workspace, which is supposed to be your dev workspace. Now you can see that there is a little diamond beside my workspaces names. That means that my workspaces are premium. And what you can see up in front is that real cool functionality. Actually, I can manage my workspace directly from the pipeline. So I can manage the access, I can manage the settings. What I can do more, I can also show the artifact inside my workspace. And right now, the deployment pipelines support only Power BI dataset, Power BI report, and dashboard. So no data flows. And the other functionality I can do, so what I can do, I can also publish the app directly from this pipeline. So, but first of all, how do you create one? Because I don't want to show a pipeline already done. So let's jump to the deployment pipeline section. I can create a new pipeline. So let's call this Calgary Power Platform User Group, and I hit create. So this is the splash screen, right? There's nothing. And the first action I should take is assign a workspace. So now if I hit this button, you can see that the tool is telling me, oh, there are no workspaces for you to assign. Why that? Because the only workspaces that I have available as premium capacity are already assigned to another pipeline, the one I showed you before. So what I needed to do for today was creating a new experience workspace that I call Power Platform User Group Calgary. And now I'm going to enable this to run in my premium. And in order to do that, I go in the workspace settings and I toggle the dedicated capacity on, and I hit save. So now a little diamond pops up beside my workspace, which means that I'm running this on my premium capacity. If I go back in the deployment pipelines and I jump into the latest one created, you can see that now I can assign a workspace. So I can select the only one available. So now it let me define the environment I want to assign this workspace to. So in my use case for this demo, I'm going to assign development. And by doing that, the tool is showing me the artifact inside this workspace, and the first action I can do is deploy to test. But before doing that, I will need to talk a little bit about the artifacts that I have inside. So let me just jump to my Power BI desktop file. So one of the reports that I publish in that dev workspace, because now it's a dev workspace, is called sales analysis. So now this report is developed in import mode, so it's getting data from a SQL Server database. I have 3 different databases, one for dev, one for test, one for prod, and I'm managing parameters in order to define which database I want to connect. Why I'm doing that because during the deployment, I need to, most of the time, trigger the refresh in an higher environment by pointing to the right database. So in my case, I'm connecting a SQL Server name, my local machine, my AdventureWorks dev, and I have 2 additional parameters for years. So because I'm also filtering the dimension date, so my calendar date, to show sales from 2017 to 2019. But it might be interesting seeing something later when I deploy this guy. So if I jump back to the deployment pipeline, the first functionality is that actually I can do selective deployment or deploy everything. So what I want to do, I want to deploy the sales analysis, the sales agent performance, and so these are the report. If I don't pick the report, but I pick the dataset, I can click the select related, and it should show me the relationship, or maybe it's just buggy right now. I don't know why. In the session I ran for myself, actually this select related is selecting the lineage, right? It's looking at the lineage of the dataset, is picking the report. So what I'm going to do right now is deploy only these 2 reports and 2 datasets. If I hit the button deploy to test, it starts working, but you see that right now there's no workspace assign. So what is like spinning up behind the scene is another premium workspace called Power Platform User Group Calgary Test. And this is actually pretty cool. It's not giving me, let me see, enough flexibility to administer the naming convention of this workspace at the very, very beginning, but is actually creating this for me. And the compare button, I do believe that Microsoft needs to improve this one, because now it's telling me, okay, if I compare that to test, not everything is deployed. Of course, you're giving me the opportunity to do a selected deployment. Why you should give me this orange button? But that's like something that I do really believe will be improved later on. And what I can do here, I forgot to mention that before, I can refresh my dataset. But most importantly, if I go inside my brand new created test workspace right now, and I look at the artifacts, you see that everything is being deployed. So actually at this point, what I will need to do is, as an administrator, is also ensuring that my schedule refresh are running properly. But it is out of scope for this demo, right? So if I go back in the deployment pipeline, I want just to show you something that I do believe is really, really cool, is the dataset rule. So now I'm gonna hit this button, deployment setting. You can see that I can apply dataset rules, and for both on my dataset, right? Let's pick the sales analysis report, for example, and there are two types of rules I can apply. Okay, there's a message, create rules defining parameters, value, and data sources. Only the dataset owner can change this setting. So now, what happened right here? Actually, as explained during the requirements section, you will need to be also a workspace admin at some point. So if I go back in the workspace access, you can see that the partner is admin. So I should be able to trigger this. But what's happening behind the scene is that if I go in the workspace itself and I look at the dataset, there might be something not actually configured over here. Actually everything's configured, so I will give it a try again later on. But just let me spend 1 second talking about the parameters. You see that by deploying a report that was connecting my dev database, the report was deployed and is still connecting the dev database. So what I can do in the deployment pipeline, and what I want to show you in this demo, is that I can actually go in this in this test workspace, define a dataset rule for the sales analysis. So let's see if it's dataset settings page to take over. There must be, or I'm not logged with the right user. So in order to showcase this capability, I will need to jump in my pipeline where I created that, and it was actually working. Sorry for that. So in my, I'm replicating the same scenario. So I'm deploying the same artifact across my workspaces, and in my test environment, I define a specific dataset rule for the sales analysis report. You can see that I can actually change the parameters value. And in my case, I decided to connect the test database, not anymore the data environment. And I also said, okay, you know what, for my testing purpose, I don't need to read all the data from 2017 to 2019. So maybe it is sufficient just looking at the 2018. And again, I did the same for the production environment, where I did create a dataset rule to connect the production database, and at this point, showing all the years inside my dimension data. And what I can show you right now is the backward deployment. So what if I want to bring back this report in my test environment? Actually, such capabilities is disabled. Why it is disabled? Because there are already those artifacts available in this test environment. So in order to do that, I will need actually to go in my workspace in the PBI Lab Premium test and get rid of my artifact. And then by jumping back in the deployment pipeline, you can see that now is the comparison is showing me that there's difference between my environment. But what I can do, I can bring back to test my Power BI report from prod. and I need just to click deploy to previous stage. And this is what there are some other capabilities coming on for sure. So actually right now there are some limitations on the number of dataset rules that you can apply, because actually you can work only with SQL Server, Azure SQL, Analysis Service, Azure Analysis Service, and I do believe also Oracle, and I'm not sure about SharePoint Online. I do believe so, but what I find as a very strong limitation right now is that there's no actual version control, and I would like to see some version control of my Power BI report, because I cannot assume that my dev content is my real final version control, and then maybe we will see and we will talk about other limitation by while we will be watching the demo of the deployment pipeline I created myself. And let me jump back to the presentation. Okay, so the next section for today is I want to talk about ALM, so Application Lifecycle Management. Why for me this is really important? Because it is giving structure to my Power BI governance, right? So I will need to govern my tenant. I will need to govern the way the citizen developer are deploying and promoting the report, how they are following the best practices, and so on and so on. Now, this is really in contrast with lot of scenario I'm seeing out there, where I see like a lot of citizen developers, they don't really care, they don't understand the importance of having a segregation of environment, right? So, and I do believe that for some specific operational report, that might be still the case, where you have one single workspace and you have different developers taking over, and there's not a real source of the truth. But when you are in a structured organization, you will need to give a little bit of governance. So today I'm going to talk about the DTAP acronym, that stands for Development, Testing, Acceptance, and Production. So this is a very common multi-tier process in IT. Nowadays, it is tough to implement that, and especially for Power BI. And there are also two additional stages that usually are inside the DTAP. It's called DTAP Straight. So that there could be also education and backup environment. But in this presentation, I'm just working with the most four common. And for the purpose of this presentation, I'm grouping together the testing and acceptance. So I will work just with three stages that I call, for simplicity, dev, test, and prod. And why those are important to me, and I do believe for every organization, because we want to give our citizen developer a kind of sandbox where they can build their own report on the fly. They can start applying good design, the standard, the convention, and I want my developers, my power user, being able to interact already with the business, which is commissioning this kind of Power BI report. So I want them to collaborate to meet if the report, to understand if the report meets the requirement, for example. And for that reason, in my development environment, I'm planning to give power users, so developers and reviewers, access. But the developers will need to have a Power BI Pro license, and they might be able to contribute, so publish Power BI report. Reviewers are there just to speed up, to be agile, to ensure that they are meeting the requirement. And then the second stage is going to be testing and acceptance, where actually the BI team can be involved as well. So it can actually measure if the schedule refresh are performant, if the design best practices are followed, if they're maybe hitting a production workload. So the report might be dangerous for other production system. And the production environment will be the only one available for my consumer. So my final user will be able to access that, not anymore inside a workspace, but inside an app. So on the left and on the right, I'm also picturing that, you know, development is giving you less performance and stability, right? But it's giving you more flexibility and adaptability, and the vice versa is true for production. So in the what is development for us in Power BI? So we use the desktop, and with the desktop we can do a lot, but we cannot actually collaborate unless we send our PBIX file to someone via email or we share that in SharePoint. I don't know. I've seen like many bad practices around, but we need a space for collaboration, right? So we need Power BI service. In Power BI service, what I'm gonna do, I'm standing up a workspace, which is called Workspace Dev, where I let my developers contribute and my reviewers review. Now, then in the testing and acceptance, I'm not sending up only a workspace. I'm also creating an app. Why that? Because I'm not giving contribution permission to my developers and my reviewers, but I'm giving only viewing permission through the app because they need just to review if the report is performed as it was in dev. And in the final stage production, I'm standing up again a workspace prod and an app prod, but then in my app prod, I'm giving permission to my final users and again my power user, because my power users are a key. They are the keys, they are the key members of my architecture because they are those with subject matter expertise, they are those developing the report, and they are those that might help the BI team debugging issues, right? And behind the scene, there are the admins. So the BI administrators, they are admin in every single stage, in the dev workspace, in the test workspace and test app, and in the prod workspace and prod app. So now again, what I hope to achieve today is that most of the work will be done in dev, 75% of work. Test and app will be used mostly for review. Sometimes I need to bring back my report to the dev environment, but most of the time I might be able to go in prod directly. Prod actually there's not much work in terms of Power BI development, bug fixing and so on. So I would like to spend time showing how we can create automation. So how can I ensure that the BI team is able to deploy automatically between the environments? And so as a recap, development environment, a dev workspace available to power user, reviewers, and BI admin. Test environment, test workspaces available to BI admins, and test app available to power user and reviewers and BI admins, and production environment available to BI admins. Production workspace available to BI admins, and production app available to power user, consumer, and BI admin. In order to implement that, the key is working with a security role-based system. So in order to implement this, I have to define 4 different roles with different permission by environment. So I have the power users, my developers, they access that as a contributor, so they can publish, but they can also view test app and prod app. And then I have the reviewers that can actually only interact and review in the dev workspace without contributing, but they can also review in the test workspace, in the test app, sorry. And then I have my consumer that are able to view the content in the production app. And the BI admins are admin in all of them. And very quickly about the workflow. So I want to show you that on the bottom layer, there's our Power BI ecosystem, right? So my Power BI desktop and my workspace dev, they will be my dev environment. And then I have the combination of a workspace test and app test for my test and acceptance environment, sorry. And I have a workspace for prod and a prod app for my production environment. Now, as a power user, I'm a key member in all of them, but I contribute only in dev. As a reviewer, I review in dev, but I review also in test because I need to actually ensure that the report is ready for production. So I'm giving a kind of sign-off as a business owner, right? And then my consumer are key only in production where they can consume the report and the dashboard using a Power BI app. And so I will just go ahead about very quickly about the next few slides, because the dev workspace is actually, as I said, space where you contribute and you review. And in my demo later on, you will see that I stood up different dev workspaces, and then I will showcase that by logging in as a Power BI power user, I'll be able only to see the dev workspaces I have permission to. And then vice versa, if I log in as a reviewer, I will see different workspaces and different apps. And why for me is important to use an app for my test environment, my production environment, because app is good for distribution, acceptance, and consumption, and actually the app can also be customized, right? So I might be able to create different color for different apps. So if you think of about my scenario, I have two different region. Sorry, I have two different apps, one for test and one for prod. And I'm using different color for them. So if I'm a member of multiple security role and I'm able to see both of them, I directly understand what I'm looking for, right? And most importantly, in the app, I can also customize the support, contact, email or link or documentation. And I can also organize my application to have a kind of very nice navigation system. And I can organize my report by section. I can also add valuable links. So let's jump at the demo. So for today's demo, I created this fictitious organization. I would love to see PBI Lab so big. So actually, PBI Lab in this demo is the headquarters, and we have two different business units. One is operating in the Western region in North America, and the other one in the Eastern region in North America. And I have different offices, 3 in the Western region, Vancouver, Seattle, and Calgary, and 2 in the Eastern region, Toronto and New York. So if I go in my PBI Lab tenant, you will see that I stood up different workspaces. Now, what is important is that you can actually see that I'm giving a right name to them. So it's actually a set of 3 workspaces by region, which is my business unit and site. So my New York site will have 3 workspaces. My Toronto site office will have 3 workspaces available. And what I did as an addition is that, what if I need to publish a report that shouldn't be visible in production only for my specific office, but is also something that might be cool for all the office of the organization. For that reason, I stood up a different workspace, which is called PBI Lab Public. And actually, this is a production workspace linked to a production app where every consumer of every site has permission to access. And how did I implement this solution? So actually, I need to showcase you a little bit of Azure. So in my Azure Active Directory, I created different Azure Active Directory groups because I want to manage the security. And you can see that I created 3 different groups by site. And if we look, for example, at the Calgary example, I have a group for the consumers, a group for the power user, and a group for the reviewers. And then I have, so I'm replicating this for every office. And then I'm creating a further group where I can add all the members of the offices group by role. So in my all Power BI consumer read-only group, I have all the consumers for my office. And of course, not only that, I also created a bunch of users. I use like bulk and PowerShell to do that. So I created a bunch of users for Calgary, bunch of users for Montreal, at least to showcase this to you. And in order to do that, I'm just now logging in Power BI using one of these users. So again, there are a bunch of stuff here, and I'm now logging in as a power user of the Vancouver office. So the security applies. It's going to say, good afternoon, Vancouver. So if I open up my workspaces as a power user, I can see only that workspace. But then and actually in this workspace, I'm also able to publish a report because I'm a power user and I'm giving that set of permission in the workspace itself, and I will show that later on. But if I open the app, I can actually view my Power BI effort in multiple apps. I can actually see the Vancouver test app, where I'll be able to see if my development is effective. And I can see the production app for Vancouver. And as I said before, I also create an overall application for all the consumers. Now, I believe there's not enough time to log in as a reviewer, but in order to show you the permission setup, it is actually sufficient for me to jump back to my full tenant where I am a Power BI administrator and show a little bit the security of my Vancouver Dev Workspace. So if I look at the Dev Workspace in the access, you can see that the administrators, the admin, they have an admin role. My power user, they have a contributor role, and then my reviewers have only a viewer role. But if I go in the workspace for test, you will see that at this point, only the admin and the service principal, you will discover what is a service principal later on, and they have this admin role. So how do I grant my reviewers permission to my test workspace? In order to do that, I'm managing this security through an application. So if I go in my app, you're going to see that I'm granting permission to my app to all the Vancouver Power BI power user and all the Power BI Vancouver reviewer. A same approach has been done for the production workspace. So if I go in the Vancouver production environment and I look at the application, you will see that in the permission I'm granting at this point not anymore the reviewers, but I'm granting the reviewers. And what I can do in this way, I can also push automatically this app and the update to this app to my final consumer. So let me say my management team in the Vancouver office, they don't really need to cope with workspaces and the cows in the workspaces. They will need just to go in the app and find the right app, which is actually Vancouver. As a consumer, they'll be able to see only this production application. And then in the app, I create a little bit of customization. So I create a welcome page so they can download Power BI desktop if they need to. They can go in the Power BI Analytics Zone. They can go in the training. They can go in the GitHub. And every one of these is created using a SharePoint online list where I can actually scale, not scale, but decouple the data source. So if tomorrow my training link is going to be different, I'm going to link this button to something different. Right now, I'm just linking the official training in Microsoft Power BI, and in the PBI Lab Analytics Zone, I'm just linking my PBI Lab website. And this the end of the demo for this multi-tier approach. And now I want to show you how did I manage this using a repo. So let me check. I have still 25 minutes available, so it should be on time. And let's go back to the presentation. Are there any questions?
If anybody has it, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, it doesn't look like it, Luca. Go ahead.
How did I implement version control with Azure Repo? So actually, Azure Repo is a set of a version control tools that we can use to manage our code. But what is important in case you're planning to manage a repo for Power BI artifacts is that you will need to apply permission and policies. Why? I would say that this repo shouldn't be open because, report might contain sensitive data, especially if they are in import mode. So you want to set up the right policy, give the right permission to the right users. And also you will need to set up policy when you're working on your version, on your code version. So for example, a good case might be that every time there's a pull request, you will need to have at least 2 reviewers, for example. You can apply branch naming convention and stuff like that. But for the purpose of today's demo, for me, it was like really, really quick. So I stood up a repo in Azure DevOps, where you can see that the repo is actually following the structure of my multi-tier architecture. So I have a folder for every business unit region, and then I have a couple of additional folders for useful PowerShell code I might need to run or trigger. and also a folder where I can actually store input files that I might be used to create workspace automatically. And I will show that in a demo in a couple of minutes. So nothing more about the Azure DevOps repo. Beside that, I strongly encourage you to apply the security on that and the right policies because you want to ensure that everything is safe, right? You don't want to store in an open repo sensitive information. And about the demo is going to be actually super quick. If I open my Azure DevOps and I jump into my repo, I call my repository Power BI operating framework. So right now you can see that I can track the history of what I've done so far. So actually this repo was born in March and I've contributed lately, actually also yesterday night, very late. And I can browse the content and I can see that in my folder, for example, for the Vancouver office, there's a Power BI report already in my version control. I can browse the different branches. Actually, every time I'm merging a branch to master, my best practice is deleting it, but I'm keeping some of the branches that just for key information. So, and what I would suggest is to explore the project setting of your DevOps. You go inside your repository, and then you select your repository, and then you can actually over here define the permission. So right now, the Power BI operating framework build server is like the administrator, also Luca Gualtieri, and then as policy, I set up that for master, there's at least one reviewer required for the pull request, but I allow myself to review my self code. Otherwise, this demo could have been run if I haven't done that. So you can do all this set of permission and policies definition inside the project setting in your Azure DevOps. And what's more important is that I clone these repositories. So actually, I created this repository using Visual Studio Enterprise. But once I have this repository set up and done, I also managing it using my Visual Studio. And in my Visual Studio, I'm connecting using the Team Explorer, my Azure DevOps. So actually over here, I can manage the connection. You can see that if I log in as Luca Gualtieri PBI Lab, I connect the Azure DevOps of PBI Lab, and then I pick the repo I want to connect to. Now I'm connecting the Power BI operating framework repo. So if I look at the Solution Explorer, you can see that I have the same folder structure. But over here, I can start like doing my version control, my deployment, and write my code. Now, everyone knows that PBIX file, they are atomic, so there's no real collaboration on top of a PBIX file. But for example, I would like to manage the different version of the PBIX file across the environment, and I'm using Visual Studio and Repo also to manage my pipeline. So I will show the pipelines in a couple of seconds. So let me go back at the presentation. And the next step is actually the good stuff, in my opinion, for this demo. The first demo I want to show you is how do I create a workspace using a pipeline. So in the hypothesis that you need to create multiple workspaces, and it's like too time consuming doing that manually because you might forget something about the security, you might misspell a name. I'm helping you give an idea to create this, right? And the first thing I need to do is to create a service principal. So now there's not enough time to run the demo. How do I create a service principal using PowerShell? But the PowerShell script is available in my GitHub, so I strongly encourage you to look at that. But what is an application, a service principal application? So actually, in Azure DevOps, if I want to run automation, I need to have an Azure app. Now, the service principal is the representation in that app that allows me to not log in my Power BI tenant using a user authentication. So I'm using a managed identity. So in order to do that, I need to create an Azure Active Directory app. I need to assign the proper API permission because my app will need to read my Power BI workspaces, will need to write in my Power BI workspaces. And in my case, for this demo, I need also to read the Azure Active Directory security groups because I want to assign this security to the workspace. And the last step I need to do once I create the application is going inside my Power BI tenant and say that this app has permission to access the API, and there's a specific session for that in the developer settings. So now, if I look at this Power BI workspace pipeline, I do believe it's better to show that in my Azure DevOps instead of looking at this picture. But in this picture, you can see that I have a pipeline created. There's a task, which is a PowerShell task. The script, the PowerShell script, is the one actually creating the workspace, assigning the security. And then in my pipeline variables, I'm just storing a certificate I need to authenticate my app, the service principal ID, which is the ID or the app service principal I created in Azure. And I need to tell my pipeline, oh, well, you want to create workspaces. Which workspace do you want to create? Give me an input file. So I'm telling the pipeline that my input file is going to be stored in a specific folder in my repo. And the workflow is pretty basic. So in Visual Studio, I create a new template with my workspace information. Then I go in Visual Studio, I create a new branch out of master from my repo. I upload the workspace that I prepared. I push everything to the repo again to be able to merge that with master and run that out of master. Then I run the pipeline, and when I'm running the pipeline, actually the pipeline takes a little bit, is creating the workspace, and if the workspace exists, it's just assigning the security as by my template. If the workspace doesn't exist, it's creating the workspace and assigning the security. So let's have a look at this in the real scenario, and then I'll ask you to follow the slides for more details because not everything is possible. So actually you cannot assign viewers using this. I don't know why Microsoft released the viewer role for the workspace, but it's not giving me the opportunity to call that using API. Actually, as of June 16, 2020, it's not yet available. I'm pushing them to have this available, but I hope this will come. And let's jump at the demo. The demo is gonna be something like this. I have right now 5 office. I want to create two additional office. So it is 6 more workspaces, right? 1 for dev, 1 for test, 1 for prod, and every one of them for both offices. So 6 of them. So let's jump at the demo. And in order to run this demo, the first thing that I will need to do is preparing a template, right? So I prepare one for today. And in my GitHub, you can find a template very similar. I'm giving the workspace name. I'm using always the same naming convention. I'm assigning the security. So this security role, they will need to be available in Azure, of course. You cannot assign a group that doesn't exist. And then I'm assigning the role. So what I'm gonna do right now is actually grabbing this workspace from here. I'm gonna copy it. And the other step in my Visual Studio, I create a new branch for this specific use case. So out of master, I create a new local branch, and I call it, maybe there's a ticket. Someone is asking me to create that, so my ticket number is this. And is an official request through my IT management system. I create a new branch locally. Now, if from this, I open the Solution Explorer, you can see that in the specific section of my repo where I need to upload the workspace, there's no such template yet, right? So what I will need to do is go inside my local repository. So actually, this is the local repo, what I'm seeing here, right? So my file system. I go inside the workspace creation configuration, and I paste the new template. So now you can see that there's a very tiny plus over here. I don't know if you can see that. There's a green plus beside my workspace name. So at this point, I'm happy the workspace, the template is good. I need just to push this, right? So what I do, I check my changes. Okay, there's something new in the project. Okay, fine. But there's a new workspace. So new, I'm giving this commit because I need to commit. I need to push this in the remote repo. So the one in Azure DevOps. I'm giving this commit description, new offices. So sorry, new workspaces for Montreal and Victoria. And so Victoria was DCT. I commit this guy. I sync with my remote. So now Visual Studio is telling me that I need to push something. There's something new. I push this guy, and now it's working. Now it is pushed, right? If I go in my repo again and I refresh the page, you're going to see that there's a new branch over here, which is my ticket number, right? So if I click the branch inside the workspace configuration, I have something just now updated. But I'm pretty sure my template is good. So I'm creating a pull request to merge this to master. I'm going to do very quickly. So I say, okay, I want these to go to master. So let's create a pull request. There should be policies defined. So I don't need to define reviewers or work item because I'm not doing this on top of a project work backlog item. I create the pull request. Now, Luca Gualtieri is the only member of that group which is required to have at least one reviewer for every pull request for this master branch. I click approve and I complete this. And I also delete the branch with the ticket number because I want to keep this only master. I don't really care about this because it's a simple change. I'm just uploading a template. Maybe it's like time consuming, right? But you will need to think this in a scenario where you want to create 100 workspaces to apply real governance, right? I forgot to mention something about the service principle before, so I will need to jump into that. But before doing that, if I go in the repo again, now this this branch doesn't exist anymore, and everything is inside master. So inside master, I have also my brand new template file. So why I will be able to create workspace using PowerShell automation is because I created a service principal in Azure. And service principal, as said, is giving me the opportunity to not authenticate as a user, right? So very quickly, if I go in the app registration in my Azure, you're going to see that there's a application I own called Power BI Service Principal. If I click this, you see that I gave this application specific API permission to read the Active Directory security group and to read and write in the Power BI service. There's a certificate assigned that I created using PowerShell before, and that's it. So nothing more. The only additional step I will need to do is that in the Power BI tenant admin settings, so in my admin portal, in the tenant setting, there's a specific section where I need to say, oh, we can use a service principal to run API in the tenant. It is called developer setting. And in order to allow service principal, you cannot allow the service principal directly, but you will need to add a security group. So the GApp Power BI Service Principal Security Group is actually a group that I have in Azure. And if I'm going to open that group, it is called GApp Power BI Service Principal Group. The only member of this group is actually my service principal, right? So this is just to complete the scenario. Now I'm able to trigger the pipeline. I created a pipeline using PowerShell, and in this pipeline that I call Power BI Create Workspace, it is actually really, really basic. So I'm running out of time, so they won't be able to see the details, but just by opening the code, you see that there's a PowerShell step where I'm doing bunch of PowerShell activities, right? And my PowerShell activities are actually summarized in, sorry for that, I need to see the taskbar, in in this script, you can find that in GitHub. It's like very well commented, so you'll be able to actually follow along. The first thing I do, I look for the certificate, the password of my service principal. Then I install the module of PowerShell in my Azure, because in my Azure pipeline, because it's a virtual machine which is like spin up in the very moment the pipeline is running. So I will need every time to install the module I need to run. Then I connect Power BI. I connect to my Power BI using the service principal, and I need just to provide the application ID, the thumbprint, and my tenant, so the tenant ID of my Power BI. What I do, I look for the file from a specific folder, and then for every record of that file, I do a bunch of actions. So I check if the workspace exists or not over here. So I'm getting the workspace, check if it exists, and then if it exists, I'm doing something different. If it doesn't exist, I'm creating a new one. Otherwise, I'm just assigning the permission. In order to assign the permission, I need to install the Azure ID module, connect Azure ID, always using the service principal. And at that point, using a invoke REST Power BI method, I'm assigning the permission by reading the template, and then I disconnect. So if I go back in the not here, sorry, too many windows open, and I go back in my pipeline, you see that I have variables defined. So actually the certificate is stored in my repo. So since the pipeline is running on top of a branch of my repo, I'm able to read the certificate. And I have the workspace details that I need to assign a runtime, right? So let's try to run this. So I go back in the create Power BI workspace. So now what I need to do is actually run the pipeline. I will need to say, okay, which master you will run this pipeline on top, right? And you've seen before that everything, I push everything to master. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just setting up a variable. So I will need to say, hey, my workspace name template file is this. And I have that over here. So I'm just copy this guy and pushing this here and click update. And once this is done, I run the pipeline. So the pipeline is doing a bunch of stuff. So I add the verbose logging on top of that to see what is going on. So spinning up an agent job, but bottom line, we will see the workspace is being created with the right security. So right now you see that is checking the thumbprint. All this step, it is because it is installing the Power BI management module for PowerShell, and then there will be a step where it's installing also the PowerShell module for Azure AD. But after that, we will see the workspace is created in my environment. So now if I go in my environment, you see that under the name region, there's nothing yet available, right? So there are only those standard, but I will need to see popping up 3 workspaces for Montreal and 3 workspaces for Victoria. And it's gonna take a minute, but I know that I'm almost running out, correct?
Correct, yeah, you're basically ready to.
Yeah, so this will be the last demo, and about the deployment, which is actually the coolest one, I will explain. If you give one additional minute, I will explain how you can follow up using the slide and the code that I publish in GitHub. So let's go back my pipeline. So you see that now, so after installing everything, it's going through my template, and it's telling me, okay, at the beginning over here, it's telling me that it's creating something called Eastern Region Montreal Dev Environment, and then it's assigning the security. But after a while, the environment already exists, because in the second line of my template, it's just adding additional user to the same environment, and so on and so on. So it's standing up all of them, and what is happening is that once this is done, you can control the pass rate of your pipeline, all of those kind of details in Azure DevOps. But what is important is that in my Power BI, I do need to refresh it. But in Power BI, if I go in my region, so let's refresh again. And now I type region. So I have a set of 3 workspaces for Montreal and a set of 3 workspaces for Vancouver. And the security is actually exactly the one I requested for. So I have my power user as contributor, the admin group as admin, and the service principal is admin. Why it is key having the service principal as admin? Because in the second demo I cannot run today. I would have shown how to use the service principal to deploy a report from one environment to the other environment. So in order to close this up quickly, 1 second. So the second pipeline, I use a Power BI action plugin out of the box developed by Mike van der Gaag. I installed that in my Azure DevOps. In my Azure DevOps, I set up a new pipeline called Publish Power BI Workspace, and the action I'm doing is uploading a report. Again, I'm telling that I need to log in using the service principal, and I'm creating a bunch of variables because I will need to tell my pipeline I want to deploy this specific report to this specific workspace. But what is really important is that when you will see the slide and you look at the workflow, the reality is that I need to download the Power BI file from the service. And in order to do that, I created a specific PowerShell script that I can trigger by using my Visual Studio. So back in my Solution Explorer over here and going back to my branch. Now I need to connect back to master. But if I connect to master, you can see that in PowerShell over here, I created a script that it is called download from a workspace. So by executing this script inside my Visual Studio in a specific branch, I'm downloading a PBIX file from Power BI. And you should consider that someone is telling you, I need to deploy to production this report, which is in this workspace. So maybe there's a ticket coming. You fill out everything in this PowerShell script. You move the report from the Power BI service to your local repo, let's say, in this specific section, which is Vancouver office. And then after that, you trigger the pipeline to promote that in that test workspace. So you go one step ahead. And the test workspace is already enabled to your reviewers. Your reviewer can review the report. If they're happy with that, they're going to tell you, well, we need to go to prod. So at that point, you don't need to do a lot of action. You just need to merge your branch to master. And from master, you retrigger the pipeline again, but this time you're moving to the workspace, which is production. And this is going to be pretty straightforward. So I'm sorry for that, there's no time for the demo. So just have a look at the resources. So the first resource is the GitHub repository. And then a bunch of cool links about how you can actually implement this using pipeline, how you create a service principal, and you can follow my code for that, and a couple of references about the API.